Welcome to another episode of Down Home with me, the Rambling Southern Gentleman. Happy New Year's. Or New Year. That should be singular. I hope all of you had a good New Year's Eve and day. Did y'all happen to catch that Rose Bowl? We'll discuss more about the Rose Bowl a little later on. More specifically, the one from 100 years ago in 1926, here in a little bit. I hope you all behaved yourself New Year's Eve. I hope those of you who did venture out didn't act a fool like a guest at a New Year's Eve party I threw several years ago. She brought her own libations. I guess my weak Dollar General champagne just wasn't enough for her. Unfortunately, she ended up relieving herself in my trash can and sat on the peace lily that I had brought home from my granddad's funeral a little earlier in the year. Thankfully, the friend who brought her to the party took her home without having to be asked to leave. As a side note, I did learn a little later on that she had acted a fool a few weeks earlier at a Christmas party where she tried to climb the Christmas tree, and when she fell off, she got up and tried to dance the Macarena barefooted on all of the broken glass ornaments that had fallen on the floor when she tried to climb that fake Douglas fir. Needless to say, she was not invited back to any parties. Did anyone eat what they were supposed to on New Year's Day? I missed out on a couple of things. Let's talk about that New Year's meal and a few other superstitions for New Year's Day. Now, I don't know who started it, but in the South, we treat New Year's less like a holiday and more like a test. A test of character, a test of preparation, and most importantly, a test to see who remembered to buy the black-eyed peas before the stores closed. See, folks think New Year's is about resolutions. That's what people up north say. Down here, New Year's is about not angering the universe before January 2nd. Because according to Southern tradition, luck is fragile. It's skittish. It's like a stray cat. You move too fast, it disappears till August. First rule everybody knows, you eat black-eyed peas. You don't have to like them. You don't have to understand them. You just gotta eat them. Personally, I prefer pinto beans, but I'll settle for black-eyed peas. They say they represent coins. Now, I've looked at them, and if those are coins, then I've been broke longer than I thought. But still, we eat them. Even folks who swear they don't believe in superstition will quietly scoop a spoonful onto their plate like, well, just in case. And then come the greens. Collards, turnips, mustard, whatever's been simmering long enough to lose its will to live. They say greens represent paper money, which explains why they got to be folded, cooked down, and usually smell faintly like pork fat and hope. You notice nobody ever says, I'm not eating greens this year. I'm financially independent. No, sir. You eat them, you complain while you eat them, but you eat them. And then there's pork, hog jows, ham, bacon, something from a pig. Because pigs root forward. They don't walk backward, which is more than I can say for most of us by February. You won't see anyone serving chicken on New Year's Day if they're serious about luck. Birds scratch backwards and fly away. That's your blessings leaving, and nobody wants to explain to the Lord they chased off prosperity with a drumstick. And then cornbread, golden, coin-shaped if it's done right. And of course, the gold represents prosperity. And if your cornbread falls apart, that's fine. If it's dry, that's not bad luck. That's just poor judgment on the cook's behalf. Now, that's all the food superstitions around New Year that I know about. If I've missed one, let me know. Let's move on to non-food New Year superstitions. Of course, we all know about the kiss at midnight. That's to ensure love and happiness through the coming year. But have you heard about the carrying a suitcase around the house? Me neither, I hadn't. That's supposed to invite travel for the new year. You're not supposed to spend money or carry anything out of your house on New Year's Day. That's so money and things won't leak out unknowingly throughout the year. I haven't heard of this one, but you're supposed to open the doors and windows at midnight to let the old year out and let the new one in. However, that may have come about by knowing you're about to eat all those peas and greens in a few hours. This one, I'm not sure if I like. There's not supposed to be any napping on New Year's Day. Supposedly that sets a lazy tone for the coming year. This one I do like, though. You're not supposed to do any chores because that'll lead to having to do them every day for the next year. Those two are a little contradictory, I think. And one I have heard all of my life. You're not supposed to do laundry. That'll wash a loved one out of your life or wash luck out for the next year. The last one I found is you're supposed to make a lot of noise at midnight to ward off evil. I had never heard of this one before. I think all my neighbors have that covered with all the fireworks. Speaking of those fireworks, one year I could tell my boxer Ruby must have known something was in the air. She was acting skittish all day New Year's Eve. It was like she knew fireworks were coming that night. When it had just gotten dark, I was taking her out to do her business. I walked out on my back porch where earlier I had opened up an Amazon package. It had one of those plastic inflated pockets inside for packing material. I had left the box out on the porch to be broken down and to take out to the garbage can the next time I went out. Well, the wind had blown that inflated packing material out onto the floor of the porch. Well, since it was dark and the light switch was a little ways outside the door, which was an unusual setup, but still, I walked out, and when I stepped out onto the porch, I stepped right on that thing, and it popped. It scared me, and I yelped, and it scared Ruby, and she hollered too, and she launched herself halfway to Selma. She shot off that porch and around the side of the house. I kept calling for her and went around the corner. And there she was, peeping around the corner of the house at me. I had to beg her to do her business and to get back up on that porch. Finally, we were inside for the night. I cut on the TV to do a little TV watching and to maybe catch some New Year's Eve entertainment. And I turned the TV up to try to mask the fireworks that I knew were to come a little later on. And as I was laying on the couch with Ruby at my feet, I had drifted off when all of a sudden, boom! And there she went, boogity, 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 off through the house. It sounded like a bomb had been dropped. I knew that wasn't fireworks, but something bad must have happened for that loud boom. At the time, I was living in downtown Gadsden, so I jumped up and went outside, as any good Southerner does, to see what's going on. I didn't see anything, so I went back in, but Ruby could not be consoled. She wouldn't come out from under the dining room table, and she stayed there until the morning sun broke through the window. When we went out the next morning, I found the culprit. Someone had obviously started celebrating early and decided to drive onto my street and right into my street side garbage can. They must have been flying too, because it launched that sucker several feet over into my azalea bushes. The same ones that every cat in the neighborhood always liked to hide out in and sing the song of their people at 3 a.m. So did y'all go out or stay at home? I always remember growing up, of course we stayed home. We would watch Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve and then watch the ball drop in New York. Did y'all watch the ball drop or catch any other drops? We'll talk more about those other drops in the last segment, specifically those around the South. Well, it's time for a short break now, but stay tuned. When we come back, we'll dive into our main stories, which are the history of Mardi Gras, Johnny Mack Brown, and Mobile's Moon Pie Drop. I've also got some stories from New Year's past for you lined up, so stay tuned. Welcome back. So let's dive into our main stories for today. and the first one is the History of Mardi Gras in Alabama. So I think as Southerners, we all are familiar with Mardi Gras. If not the specifics, we know the basics. You know, New Orleans, Fat Tuesday, a lot happening around February. But did you know it originated in Alabama and was a New Year's centered thing? Let's talk about it. Way back in 1702, before Alabama was a state, the first capital of French Louisiana was Mobile. At the time, it was a strategic location for the French and their territory on the bay with river access and access to the Gulf of Mexico. It was the French who introduced Mardi Gras to Mobile. The credit goes to the first French settlers to the area, and I'm going to butcher this name, so stick with me, Pierre Lemaine d'Iberville and Jean-Baptiste Lemaine d'Iberville. I'm so sorry. But you can look that one up if you want to know the specific pronunciation. It's recorded that the first celebration included feasting and plenty of drinks. This first celebration was recorded as occurring in 1703 and taking place in the area of 27 Mile Bluff, which was the first settlement of Mobile. This event became an annual tradition. As the next century played out, Mobile found itself ruled by the French, and then the British had their hand in ruling the territory, and then the Spanish held Mobile. Finally, in 1810, Mobile became a part of the United States' Alabama territory, and then in 1819, Alabama gained its statehood, which meant Mobile had become an American city. After several years into the Alabama statehood, Mobile would make its official claim on Mardi Gras, or as it's also known as, Carnival, when a fella by the name of Michael Kraft partied a little too much on New Year's Eve. On New Year's Eve, 1830, Mr. Kraft spent the evening with his buddies, Thomas Niles, Robert Roberts, Henry Dagger, Daniel Geary, Nathaniel Ledyard, Richard Curie, and Amuel Kipp at the Antoine La Tourette's restaurant in the Southern Hotel in Mobile. By all accounts, they spent the evening enjoying food and much drink, maybe a little too much. As daylight peeked over the horizon, the gang departed the hotel and wandered through the streets of Mobile when they passed Partridge's hardware store, where the group observed the clerks stocking the displays with rakes and other implements. Mr. Kraft and his buddies couldn't pass the store up and purchased a slew of items that included cowbells, rakes, gongs, and anything else they could find in the store to make noise with. After making their purchases, they stumbled back onto the cobblestone streets of Mobile and paraded through the streets, making as much noise as possible. The group finally ended up at the future mayor's house, Jonathan Stocking, and that's where their parade came to an end. The first year, Mr. Kraft's group called themselves the Midnight Revelers. After this tradition continued, the group would be renamed the Cowbellion de Rakin Society, which was a parody of French society names. This specific group survived for 50 years before others started taking its place. This was the start to the mystic societies in the U.S. that put on Mardi Gras now. On a side note, these mystic societies would become known as crews, spelled Krews, when Mardi Gras would spread over to New Orleans and flourish. Mr. Kraft eventually moved to New Orleans, taking the event with him, and other mystic societies started, and after rooting in New Orleans, they flourished. After his move to New Orleans, Mardi Gras in Mobile persisted, but not as strongly as in New Orleans. Now you may say, how did it become less associated with New Year's and more centered around Fat Tuesday? Well, I'm glad you asked. When Mr. Kraft moved to New Orleans and Mardi Gras started taking root in New Orleans, it evolved a little bit. New Orleans had a stronger French presence at that time, and with that presence was a stronger presence of Catholics. Fat Tuesday is more of a Catholic tradition based on the Easter season, and so Mardi Gras started evolving into a schedule and tradition based on Fat Tuesday before Easter. So that, my friends, is the story of the beginnings of Mardi Gras and how Alabama holds the claim of the nation's first Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras is still celebrated in Mobile. However, it varies somewhat now from how it's celebrated in New Orleans. From my research, it seems as though the Mardi Gras celebrations in Mobile are more family-centered and family-friendly, whereas what I've seen of the celebrations in New Orleans, families with children shouldn't be within a 100-mile radius. So moving on, let's talk a little bit about Johnny Mack Brown. Now, the South has many heroes. Some call Johnny Mack Brown one of those heroes due to a football game he played for the University of Alabama in the Rose Bowl back 100 years ago in 1926. He also became a movie star representing the state of Alabama well in both endeavors. Johnny was born to Ed and Mattie Brown on September the 1st, 1904 in Dothan, Alabama. He became well known in Dothan as the Dothan Antelope, playing high school football. Both he and his 4 brothers excelled at football in high school, and they all ended up being recruited by the University of Alabama to play football. Yes, all 5 of them. Johnny grew to be 6 foot 1 inches tall and a stout force to be reckoned with. Back in the football season of 1925, Bama was invited to play in the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California. This was the first invitation to the Rose Bowl, or any bowl game for that matter, that a football team from the South had ever received. Back in 1914, Auburn, known then as Alabama Polytechnic Institute, had worked hard and enjoyed an undefeated season that year. However, unfortunately, they were not invited to the Rose Bowl, much less any other bowl game. You see, back during those years, the South was suffering from the stigma carried over from the Reconstruction years after the Civil War. Many were under the wrong impression that Southerners, in general, were less intelligent and uncivilized. So in many arenas, the South was overlooked. This was the case for Auburn back in 1914. However, by 1925, things had changed a little bit, and the University of Alabama was invited after their stellar season. Many laughed at Bama being invited. The famous coach, Pop Warner, told the press in an interview that Bama was too light to stop that big Washington team. By all accounts, it seemed that many were right in their criticisms of Bama. However, Bama would have the last laugh when it came to the end. Coach Wallace Wade, who led Bama, knew the reputation of the university and the state were on the line with this game due to the feelings towards the South at the time. Coach Wade and his team came to play. They worked hard and practiced hard, giving up holiday time with their families to practice and endure the long journey by train to California. On New Year's Day, 1926, at halftime, the score was 12-0 with the Huskies leading. In the third quarter, Bama turned the heat up and scored 3 rapid succession touchdowns. 1 was scored by Allison Pooley Hubert and 2 by Johnny. After those touchdowns, the Huskies didn't give up and was giving Bama a run for their money. The Huskies scored again, bringing the score to 20-19 with Bama behind. When the clock started counting down the final seconds of the game, the ambitious Huskies attempted to score again, but Johnny made a tackle which by all accounts was spectacular, and Bama won the game. After Bama's victory that year, 100 years ago, in the Rose Bowl, Johnny became a hero, not just back here at home in Alabama, but all over the country. He was featured on boxes of Wheaties, and his face was plastered all over newspapers everywhere. Hollywood picked up on his fame, and offers started to come in for Johnny. He was offered a contract and signed with MGM. He appeared in Our Dancing Daughters with Joan Crawford in 1927. He co-starred with stars such as Norma Shearer, Mae West, Mary Pickford, and Greta Garbo. He also starred in the 1930s Billy the Kid, solidifying his stardom with MGM. He found himself becoming friends with Spencer Tracy, who he frequently played polo with, as well as Clark Gable, who he duck hunted with often. Johnny married Cornelia Foster, known as Connie, and they had 4 children. They made their home in Beverly Hills complete with a cement pond. Johnny passed away in 1974 at the age of 70 and is buried in Glendale, California's Forest Lawn Cemetery. So now let's talk about moon pies in Mobile. Now I'm relying on the assumption that everyone knows what moon pies are. Well, in 1972, when faced with the problem of Mardi Gras parade onlookers being whopped in the noggin with boxes of Cracker Jacks and suffering injuries, the organizers of Mardi Gras, or as it's also known, Carnival, festivities in Mobile, put a stop to the boxes of Cracker Jacks being hurled at attendees from the floats. Something had to replace the boxes of Cracker Jacks, though. You see, things being thrown at onlookers, which are known as throws, go back to 1837, when the Cowbellion de Rankin Society would throw fruit. Over the years, other things such as plastic cups imprinted with various societies' names and logos, plastic beads, candy, small toys, stuffed animals, and so on, would start to be thrown. Moon pies were first thrown to Mardi Gras crowds in 1956 from the Queen's float by the children riding the float. However, in 1972, when Cracker Jacks were banned, moon pies became the premier treat thrown at Mardi Gras festivities in Mobile. Moon pies are distinctly a southern treat. Originating in Chattanooga, Tennessee in the early 1900s, moon pies were a child of the Chattanooga Bakery Company, and an answer to several miners' requests for a filling and tasty treat to fill their lunch buckets. It's moon pie history lore that when Earl Mitchell Sr., a salesman for the Chattanooga Bakery, visited the company store for a mining company, he asked the miners what they would like. After being told they wanted a tasty, filling treat of just the right size, he asked how big. One of the miners raised his hands, encircling the rising moon, indicating the perfect size. After returning to the bakery with the requirements in mind and the perfect size indicated, he saw bakery workers making treats for themselves by dipping graham crackers in marshmallow. He played around with this idea and formulated the moon pie with its iconic full moon shape, and of course, the moon pie name comes from the miner using the moon as a reference when indicating the perfect size. The owner of Toomey's Mardi Gras Candy Company, Stephen Toomey, stated that more than 4 million moon pies are sold during the Mardi Gras season. With moon pies being such an iconic fixture of Mardi Gras, Mobile set out to capitalize on the icon for their New Year's Eve festivities, since Mobile is the birthplace of Mardi Gras here in the United States. Mobile tasked Stephen Mussel, one of Mobile's premier float builders, with creating a giant lighted moon pie to be dropped at midnight in downtown Mobile on New Year's Eve. Mr. Mussel met the challenge head-on and created a 600-pound glowing moon pie, which was comprised of 1,500 clear lights, aluminum tubing, 10 sheets of plywood, and a massive conglomeration of banana-colored mache. The massive moon pie made its debut on December the 31st, 2008, and dropped without incident. The event was marked by the Chattanooga Bakery providing a 55-pound moon pie for the festivities, the biggest in the world at the time. The moon pie drop in Mobile has since become a treasured Southern annual tradition for New Year's Eve. Now I want a big old banana moon pie and an ice-cold RC Cola. And pro tip, if you stick that banana moon pie in the microwave for about 15 to 20 seconds, absolute perfection. Well, it's time for a short break. Stay right there. There's more to come yet. Welcome back. So I remember when the moon pie drop debuted. I found it at the time almost ridiculous, but have really come to appreciate its quirkiness and tradition now. I love it. But there's a few more interesting drops that occur, especially here in the South. I think my favorite is the ball drop in Gatlinburg at the Space Needle. I've always wanted to attend that one, but I've never been able to make it happen. Then there's reeling in the New Year event down in Orange Beach at the wharf, where they party what seems like pretty hard from the pictures I've seen, and then drop a huge marlin at midnight. Then there's Dothan's Peanut Drop. When researching for the show, I found the Dothan Peanut Drop, but I couldn't find any other info on it other than the drop that occurred in 2017. I'm not sure if that one is still taking place or not. Then there's Piedmont, Alabama's Sparkly the Squirrel Drop, where Sparkly the Squirrel, who is the fire department's mascot, is lowered from the ladder of a fire truck at midnight. The event is family-friendly and includes all kinds of activities. Then there's the Possum Drop over Tallapoosa, Georgia. This one looks interesting to me as well. I would like to go check this one out for myself one year. They lower a metal cage ball lit by lights with Spencer, the stuffed possum, inside the ball at midnight. The town was originally known as Possum Snout. So, as a play on the town's history, they started the annual Possum Drop on New Year's. It's important to note, as pointed out by the organizers, no live animals are used, for those who are worried, so rest easy. For years, back when Gadsden, Alabama had the Goodyear plant, I always thought that they should have gotten in on the drop fund for New Year's by having the Goodyear tire drop. Since so many rural Southerners like to burn tires, I figured they could have hoisted a big old Goodyear tractor tire up on the humongous flagpole that used to be in the parking lot of the Pollock Motor Company in downtown, and set it ablaze and drop that thing at midnight. I think they missed a good opportunity with that one. However, I guess lighting up a tire might not be a good idea for the environment, and would probably pose a risk with the melting, burning rubber dripping off and getting caught by the wind. I can see the crowd running for the hills so as not to have burning rubber falling from the sky on their heads. I did spend a New Year's Eve out on the downtown in Gadsden one year. After wanting to venture out that New Year's Eve for some odd reason, and not being invited anywhere, me and a friend decided to hit up the downtown tavern for their New Year's Eve party. They were having a live band, and I knew the owner, so it sounded like a good plan. We arrived, and there was a nice crowd there. Many I knew, and some I didn't. The band I had never heard or seen in person, but I knew a few of the members. They were the young hipster types, so I figured it would be interesting and a pretty good evening, and it was interesting for sure. To start things off, a very enthusiastic guy with a blow tickler kept blowing that thing in my ear and everyone else's ear for the whole duration of the evening. But he was having a good time, so I overlooked it, and so did everyone else. The band was really good. They had an odd mix of instruments, which included drums, a steel guitar, an electric guitar, someone on the mouth organ, a trombone, and an accordion, and a saxophone. I say they were good, and they were, for the one song they seemed to be able to play. They would always announce a song and then start it, but it always ended up sounding like Georgia on My Mind. They seemed to play that constantly, and maybe one or two songs that ended up sounding a little different in between. It got close to midnight, and I said to my friend, "Well, we've heard Georgia on My Mind 23 times now. Maybe they'll know Old Lang Syne and hit it out of the park." Well, the countdown started, and when it hit midnight, and everyone popped their confetti poppers, the band started to play. And can you guess what? Yep, a rousing rendition of Georgia on My Mind, but this time with a little spice. That girl was really cutting down on her accordion. Unfortunately, I never caught them out anywhere after that. I hope they're out there today and are successful. And as a side note, I think the Georgia Bureau of Tourism should hire them to do a commercial. Then there was the lady there that was trying to teach everyone dance moves to all the songs. I guess she could tell a difference between the songs that they were playing. She would teach a couple this move and that move and then move on to another group of people. As I watched her, every dance she taught for each song was the same. It was the hokey pokey. Without a doubt in my mind, it was the hokey pokey. If anything, that New Year's Eve was very entertaining sitting back in my little booth in the corner. It did remind me, though, why I tend to enjoy staying in on New Year's Eve. Last year I stayed in. I missed midnight because I fell asleep early, though, but that's not to say it wasn't an eventful night at all. I always like to watch the Poseidon Adventure on New Year's Eve, I guess because they are celebrating it on the ship in the movie. Their New Year's Eve party is interrupted by a rogue wave that overturns the ship, and a group of them try to escape. Well, I had put the movie on, and I had already ate a whole cold cut and cheese tray and polished off a box of cordial cherries, you know, the chocolate-covered cherries with cream. Well, I had fallen asleep, and while the movie was playing, I was picking up the lines from the movie and was dreaming, like I was in the movie. Well, as the ship turned over, I tossed around in my bed and knocked over the rest of the 2-liter Diet Pepsi that was on my nightstand from my pig fest. That Pepsi went in 2 directions. On me, in the bed, and all over my MacBook on the nightstand. As the wave of Diet Pepsi hit me, I just knew I had been tossed in the ocean, and I woke up screaming. When I jumped out of bed, still half asleep, I tripped over the empty meat and cheese tray I had left in the floor next to the bed, and over I went, face first into the floor, nearly knocking my teeth out on the corner of the dresser. As you can tell, I'm not the most graceful person. As I realized what had happened, I jumped up and started to take the sheets off the bed, which were soaked in the Diet Pepsi, when I looked over and realized my MacBook was swimming in it on the nightstand. Sadly, my laptop was a victim of New Year's Eve that night. It couldn't be saved. So moving on, have any of you made any resolutions? I stopped making those a few years ago. It seemed like I always let myself down before I even got out of the month of January. Every now year, I just promise myself that I'm going to try to be the best person, the best human being I can be, and treat everyone by the golden rule. Through my research on the topic of resolutions for the new year, I found that the term New Year's resolutions first appeared in print in a Boston newspaper in 1813. The tradition began as a vow to improve oneself or leave unwanted habits behind. It's also supposed to be a time of reflection and clarity. I do spend a lot of time this time of year reflecting on the year past and making plans for the coming year. I think that's important for everyone to do every year, if not once a year, all through the year for that matter. So, are there any other traditions that I missed, or maybe superstitions that you've heard that I didn't cover? Tell me. If you're listening on the radio, please send me an email at contactdownhomeshow@gmail.com. Or if you're listening on YouTube, please comment below. I would love to hear from you. There was one tradition that I already knew about, but ran across several times in my research for the show, and that's the firing of guns at midnight. Now, I understand being excited about the new year, but I find this one to be a little too much. I'm fine with fireworks, but come on. That bullet has to land somewhere, and it could be on someone, or if not on someone, it can damage someone's property. Let's leave that tradition behind in the years to come. I want to thank you for listening. It really means a lot to me, and I hope to bring you even better content in the coming year. Let me know of any topics or stories you would like me to cover. I've heard from some of you already, and I've already gathered many ideas from listeners. I would also love to hear your input on the show with any suggestions or comments. How can I improve? What am I doing that you're really liking and want me to continue? As always, like I said before, I can be reached at contactdownhomeshow@gmail.com. I want to wish every one of you, your family, and other loved ones the very best for the year ahead. May you be healthy, happy, safe, and blessed. Thanks for listening. This has been the Rambling Southern Gentleman, signing off. Until next time.